Hey, folks, welcome in. It's Coach and the Commentator with Joe and Jon Crispin. I'm ESPN college basketball analyst Jon Crispin. He is brother Joe, head coach, Rowan University men's basketball, former Nittany Lion great, an actual pro. I like to tell people I played professionally, but let's be real. I didn't really stay anywhere too long, long at all. So I dabbled. We'll say that. Dabbled a little bit, enough to develop an understanding of the way the game is played, more so than have a real experience. But you had real experiences. You had your family over there multiple years. Nothing like taking the family to Turkey, Bonderma, Turkey. Like Italy sounds fun, but you were in Mariupol. You were in Mariupol, Ukraine. As crazy as that sounds right now, that was your last stop, right? Mariupol.
Yep, that's right. President Putin visited there the other day. Bombed out. Sad. Very sad.
Unbelievable seeing that. So where we're at, it's been a while for us. Been a couple weeks.
Work got in the way.
Yeah, well, for good
work got in the way of hobby.
Yes, but the thing is, too, at some point we'll be better about actually fitting this in when it's current and relevant. There was a lot going on. Like Sweet 16 for you, nice little bus trip out to Mount Union. Give us a little recap for the end of your season and kind of where you stood when it all ended.
Well, simplest way is that we lost in the Sweet 16 round to Wisconsin Oshkosh, who then lost to Mount Union in a tight one, and Mount Union lost at the buzzer, which many people might have seen in the national title game. And once you reach that round of 16, and you can win, you can lose. I mean, you can win. Yeah, everybody's good. We weren't great, but they shot the ball like I've never seen before. They were 16 for 29 from three, and I was like, okay, I knew you guys were good shooters, but not like this. It was crazy. Yeah. So, overall, we were pretty close to maximizing our potential. Feel pretty good about it. I'm not, anyone who knows me, super content or inclined to contentedness when it comes to winning. I always think there should be more, but there certainly could have been a lot less but it was the next step as the program. So you feel good about it. You learn from it and you move on. So it was good. It was a busy couple weeks, but it was a good step. And naturally you always want more, but you could have had a lot less. So I'm thankful.
All right. So it makes me think of kind of where we are right now. As I'm getting ready, I leave tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, for the Sweet 16 up at Madison Square Garden. I'm doing that for Westwood 1. See Michigan State, K-State, Florida Atlantic versus Tennessee. So that'll be fun. You kind of wrap things up. But one of the craziest things right now is when teams make a run that you weren't expecting to make a run, and then the immediacy when it comes to the hire, right? And your friend Tobin Anderson, the guy you know well, I had him at the first four. I got to spend a little time with him. It was kind of funny watching that team. Never would I have imagined that they could have beaten Purdue, but I had an idea that they could have given them trouble. Quick guards, they're going to run and jump and press and play fast and just get you all over the court and get you uncomfortable. They did that with Purdue. Still didn't see it coming, but what ends up coming from that is you have an epic run like FDU had, an absolutely epic run, which is crazy because they didn't even win their conference tournament championship game. Merrimack won. They were just
the run was just a game.
Yeah, really.
If you think about it like that, that's what everything's kind of built on March. And I think it's probably, they still had a good season. Jesus, first year, he's a very good coach.
Well, they won 4 games last year.
Yeah. For a turnaround and bringing in D2 guys and all these dynamics.
Robert had a very good season. Point guard. He was a D2 guy with him last year. What was it St. Thomas? Where was he?
No. How am I forgetting this? Thomas Aquinas, yeah.
Thomas Aquinas, okay.
So Stack, we just call him Stack. So but yeah, they had a good season, not an amazing season, but a good season for all things considered. And then you make that run, and now the word seems to be today that he's headed to Iona, which is a great job. So again, this is But again, this is somebody who can coach, and naturally, I think I can coach, and other guys at this level can coach, and he thinks. The next job's kind of easy because you get so much more, not less. He'll be fine. So,
you've said that before. Being at the D3 level and having played at a Power 5, you've said that before, where you feel like it might almost be easier doing what you're doing now and all the things that you have to do, everything from the coaching that is normal to the making your own lockers in your locker room. You've kind of
Not that bad now, but that did happen.
yeah,
Yes.
that did really happen. But you said that before. Like, speak to what that means, because I think a lot of people think, and we had this conversation because the conversation has been about Penn State, and we will get there. Resources, right? People think resources are money. Define resources, and maybe it's, you know what? Maybe this is a conversation where it's a little bit more about a specificity, right? Like Penn State, the conversation about resources is different. But give me your sense of the difference in resources and what that actually means to a coach.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, it means that you have a more narrow road. Maybe it means maybe you have less options, not more, which is dangerous sometimes to have more, because you can just get caught up in a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. I mean, the thing that we talk about often, whether I'm looking at my own, I'm going to evaluate my own season. I'm going to evaluate the players that we know we have coming back and players who we think we have coming in, the program and our staff, and when they can get to practice and when they can't get to practice. These are all constraints, right?
Yes.
These are constraints. These are the guardrails on the road. Well, no matter where you are, I think the clearer you are about the constraints, and I think we've talked about this before, the clearer you are about how you can win where you are. And I think a lot of
Wait,
people,
you would say constraints different than limitations, correct?
not necessarily.
Well, I'm
I
saying
think a
limitations seem more superficial.
but a limitation is a constraint. I mean, a limitation is, it's just quicker for me to change the nets than it is for me to get somebody else to do it. So I do it, or fix the rim because I have to explain it to somebody, and I just do it. We don't have all the infrastructure in place because even though we're a big school, we still operate small school in many respects.
But I'm thinking of the way you and I talk about the rules and something like a shot clock. A limitation is putting kids in a 2-3 zone and not allowing them to steal the ball. That's a limitation, whereas the constraint is a shot clock that is put upon them to say, figure it out.
I think you can probably go either way, like with that. And I think I think, just to get back to kind of your original question, I think Tobin mentioned this actually in one of the things I saw him say somewhere, where he talked about how, I get to coach more, right?
Yeah.
I get to do, and that's the only reason that I can be discontent at times at D3 is just I don't get to do as much of what I'm best at.
You're dealing with like admissions and getting kids in and how and financial.
Yeah, and we have help. I mean, we have help, but there's still that component of not having the off season and all these different things. And but it's a constraint. It's a limitation. Yeah. It is what it is. I don't resist that. I don't try to break down the barrier or the guardrail and just try to move it back, because that's just a waste of time. That's what a lot of people do when they go to a school has less than what they had, right? Whether it's an assistant coach at a big time school going to a smaller school, they're often complaining about things that Tobin's at FDU saying, man, this is great. I got all these full-time guys and I'm good to go. And that's why he was prepared to maximize his opportunity. And again, there's luck involved. Would he have beaten Texas or somebody else? Probably not. Purdue acted like a classic Goliath in that game. But I think when you look at, is it easier to go from less to more or from more to less?
Yeah.
Well, and that's something we talk about with all these coaching changes. And I think schools are starting to see that just from some, conversations I've had with a variety of people, whether it's coaches or administrators. They're starting to see that when somebody moves from more to less, that's a harder adjustment than moving from less to more, and I think Tobin's a good example of that.
Well, also that does, and I don't really want to get to this yet because I think we're going to have a longer conversation about it, but that does remind me of the Penn State situation. Even when going back to Pat Chambers, and Pat came from Villanova, where obviously it's more of a basketball school, obviously, and you come to Penn State where, clearly the buy-in, the belief in the program just isn't there. It's far beyond the administration. It's communal too. And I think it's statewide. I mean, what sells in that state if not football and wrestling? So I think it's an interesting conversation there, where certain jobs at the Power 5 level almost require someone to come up as opposed to even make a lateral move within the conference when things are so different. I mean, think of Mike Griff from Purdue to here. It's like, wow. I don't even know how to explain how different this is. Let's look at were you surprised at all with Ed Cooley? I thought that was an interesting one. We spent 12 years at Providence. How can you explain this? Because I think a lot of people struggle with, well, it's his alma mater. It's his home. How could you leave? Like, put that into words from a coach's perspective. You did pretty much everything you do. You won a Big East title last year. How much more can you accomplish in Georgetown? Obviously, a big national brand.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I mean, he's clearly a really good coach. I think I'd have a hard time with that one, right?
Yeah.
Of
well, yeah, I think you and I would, but
I think the key to that conversation is if he did feel like he maxed out. I can understand that, right?
Yeah.
Just from a coaching perspective, if you feel like you've maxed out and done everything you can do, if you don't change and shift, you're going to die, right? And I don't mean die literally. I mean die like you're not going to continue to develop and move forward and improve, which is what you want to do as a coach, right? On the flip side, I'd say, well, you still haven't won a national title. You know, did he go to a Final Four? Like maybe my standard would be a little bit higher for that to say, hey, if you got another 10 years left, and I don't know him, but he's clearly done a great job.
Well, he's got to have another 10 years left if you're taking over Georgetown right now. I mean, that's
and listen, I
overnight
think
fix.
You're going to a fellow Big East school. I think that whole notion of potential, it is understandable, right? In the sense that Georgetown has a different kind of history.
Yeah.
The way Cooley's teams play would make sense at Georgetown, right? So can you get more? Possibly. Can you continue to win and do really well in the Big East? Definitely, right? Yeah. They're kind of a sleeping giant, I think, in the Big East.
But also something you and I have talked about before too. It's the ideal time to take over a program when they're at their lowest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because there's nowhere to go but up. You know, Patrick Ewing struggled with them, and again, it was his first head coaching job. Cooley's going to know, and he knows the league and the landscape well enough that's not going to be hard for him. So I was surprised though. You know, I'm a home person. That's why I'm at Rowan, right? And that's a tough move. I'm sure it is a tough move, and I'm sure he'll have a couple days where he's wondering whether he should have done it at all. But at the same time, from a coach's perspective, you want to learn, you want to develop, you want to improve. I can respect that. I understand that.
All right. So the other one that, obviously we kind of touched on the availability because of the move, Rick Pitino from Iona to St. John's. Really interesting one because I think a lot of people see like St. John's is dead. It's not that big of a job. It's not a great job. It's hard to recruit that area. I would argue that if you are a personality that is bigger than the program itself, that changes. New York City does matter. There's a ton of kids coming from New York City. They may not go to school there. A lot of these kids don't even go to school in New York City. They'll go to some of these academies, but the concept of getting guys to come home on a second time around is really interesting. And I think Rick Pitino, he can coach. He's won everywhere. But B, his personality probably changes that program quite a bit. He can be Mr. New York City. Like, I think that was the conversation about Lav. Like, could Lav have that personality that's galvanizing in so many ways, kind of be the star in the city? I think Rick Pitino can do that. Likely the right move. What are your thoughts on Pitino?
Well, I mean, he was inevitable that he was going to move up whenever he could, right? Yeah. Whenever he could kind of, I don't know how this whole like cleansing process works in the NCAA. Sometimes it takes like a month, and then other times it takes years.
Forget about it. Yeah.
So
well, you just wait for other people to do ridiculous things. It's like, oh, Chris Beard, thanks. Like,
true. And then
situation in Alabama. All of a sudden, Nate Oates doesn't look like the real. I don't know. Doesn't look good. Let's just put it that way. The optics are not good. So all of a sudden we forget about it. Will Wade gets a job. Like, doesn't that all kind of play into it?
Yeah.
Like, are we really worried about Rick Pitino, considering that less than a year away from what happened with Chris Beard, which if you saw the actual documents, the actual police report, it's alarming that someone would immediately go and hire him. And like, what are we talking? Shoot. Will Wade gets hired and he gets a 5-game suspension. Like, look, we're going to really do things right. Like, congratulations, guys. Way to go.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty humorous, actually.
Like, it's comical, but doesn't that all play into it? Like, are we really worried that much about Rick Pitino anymore because of all the other stuff that's taken place since then? Isn't that a big piece of it?
Well, I think, but go back, take a step back. I think a lot of times when you talk about these hires, right, they're administrators are people, right? The people are involved. They're usually looking for a hire they can explain and justify at a press conference. They're also usually looking for a hire that they can justify if it doesn't work out, right? That's another thing.
And keep their job. I always say like that.
And
That's the challenge with you. That's the challenge with you. It's hard to justify hiring you at a higher level right now, coming from the D3 level until you win a national championship or multiple or whatever. It's hard to justify you and keep their job if it doesn't work, right? Like there's that concept. Whereas these assistants who have been an assistant under somebody for 10, 12, 15 years, somehow that's an easier thing to sell, right? I mean, it seems like that.
Yeah, I also think, though, they're also looking in those bigger jobs, like you're looking for someone who can carry the program and carry the press conferences and carry the persona of the whole thing. That's what this has become, right? The CEO position, which is what Pitino has. Like, he's got the weight, he's got the clout, he's got the history to carry a St. John's job like that, right?
Yeah.
Will it work? Probably. He's going to get good players. Yeah. He plays a style of ball that players like. I think that's attractive about Pitino. Yeah. That's why he fit at Iona, right? They always have played that way. That's why Tobin's going to fit at Iona.
He's also got an edge. He's got an edge about him too that I think it resonates with players.
Yeah, he's always has.
He's got that mob boss mentality.
Like, yeah, he always has. But he lets players play at the same time. Yeah. So I think it's an understandable, like, if you're looking at St. John's, it's not just like, can this guy coach? It's just, will the loudest people on Twitter have that big a problem, right? Yeah. And again, these are just people who are not really in the know of what the program limitations are. But this is a Big East job with a long history. So if you can't get some New Yorkers to come home, well, then they might as well stop the program if Pitino can't do it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's almost at that point where programs get to a point where it's just like, okay, can we socially bring him in? Okay, if the answer is yes, then we're doing it. And that's got to be a conversation. It has to be a conversation there about it. Like, is the timing right? And I feel like the answer is yes with all else that's going on.
Maybe. I mean, listen, the reality is, how many times are they right? When people say, oh, that's the right hire. And then 4 years later, they're saying the same thing. Yeah, what does that even mean anymore? Right? Yeah. It's like, right for what? Right for what aim? Right for what are we trying to get to here? What are we trying to accomplish? Oftentimes there's no clarity on that. So how do we even know? Right? If it's just a short-term win, then okay, fine. That's fine too. Yeah. But I think it's an interesting time of year. I also think it's a good conversation to have when we talk about ring off.
You got phone ringing. You must have kids downloading something too. Your slow connection. This is just amazing.
Who knows? The thing is, like, the importance of March, right? Maybe the overvaluing of March. I think an interesting thing. Naturally, getting to March is an accomplishment in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
I said that to my team. We're in D3. I said, you want to play as much as you want to get to March and play as long as you can in March. And naturally, now with Division I, it's try to get to April. That'd be able, but get to the NCAA tournament, play as long as you can in the NCAA tournament. And I think one interesting conversation is just how different tournament play is than the regular season. And why
we've talked about that. We've talked about that a lot with the Big Ten. That has been, that's been,
and we need to keep talking about it.
Yeah. It's been my conversation on radio. It's constant. Like, what is the deal?
Well, and that's what, what's interesting. Like, we talk about the Purdue, and I don't know if I mentioned this in many of our texts, but just how, and even in my level, right, we play 18 regular season games, 2 in the playoffs. We won the NJAC playoffs. That's 20 games against our conference teams.
Yeah.
Now, our conference is not a copycat league. So we have a lot of diversity in the way teams play and the way they defend. And I've always tried to make the connection between this team and another team on the national scale, even if they're not a good team in our conference. Like the way they defend is how this team defend in the NCAA tournament. I did that the whole season. And I think that's important because like you're trying to prep for tournament play all the time. Well, the Big Ten is, I think I texted you this. It's like they've been playing against the Big Ten for 2.5 months only. With very few, if no exceptions. And the Big Ten is a copycat league. It's we slow down, we beat each other up. It
funny.
Really hasn't changed.
You say copycat, and I always say it's in a league where you assimilate to one another. You assimilate to the Big Ten to be able to win in the Big Ten. So it's
and there were exceptions to that. I think Maryland was a little bit of an exception to that.
Different.
I think Penn State was an exception to that, and I think that gave them an edge over Texas A&M because they were different.
Iowa is too, but it's almost like they can't figure out how to be defensively adequate.
Yeah, they need to be better defensively in the tournament. Yeah. That's exactly right. But also a little more efficient offensively. But they don't, as much as I love Murray, like, we look at, so just go to tournament play, right? It's a one-off game, Arizona versus Princeton, right? If this is the 7-game series, everyone's picking Arizona, as you should. But I said early on in that game, because I've seen Princeton play, like if the Arizona guys don't play aggressive, Princeton will have the best player on the floor. And they did. Yeah, and they might have had the 2 best players on the floor, right? They're big, who's not really a big. He's a 6'8" guard. Yeah. Great passer. And then the shooter, number 3. I think it's number 3, kid from California. Yeah. Well, he was more aggressive and more dangerous than Kirk Kriisa, right? Yeah. Kirk Kriisa is sitting there passing up open looks, and I'm like, dude, if you can't make that, if you're not going to shoot this with confidence in the last 12 minutes of the game, you're going to lose. And sure enough, they did. Well, that's a one-off game. And, I think Princeton is a good team. I think the Ivy League was more competitive than people thought. But in a tournament setting, you're now playing, Purdue's the best example. They're playing a team that they haven't played at least for 3 months. Yeah. And probably not at all. Yeah. So they have 0 experience playing against this team, right?
Even just the concepts alone, the concepts, the approach, all of it.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good your scout is. It doesn't matter how good your game planning is. This team is different, right? This is one of the reasons why I've built my team to be different. I think it gives us, it doesn't guarantee anything in tournament play except giving us a chance. That's all I want. I want to guarantee us a chance every year.
But you base a lot of this on antifragility too. I mean, there's a deeper philosophical approach to this too. It's not just like, hey, on the surface, I want to be different. It's like, no, this is a deeper level of different and almost adjustability, adaptability,
Well, yeah, you want to be able to beat a variety of teams. But listen, I still lost to a team in our last game that we didn't match up with great, right? Yeah. They moved and they passed and they kept moving and moving. That wasn't our best matchup. There were other matchups that would have been, doesn't mean we couldn't have won. They shot the lights out. They played really well. We were just okay. But still, there are matchups that there's nothing you can do as much as you want to be anti-fragile. You are who you are, right? Yeah. But the one thing about that is if you're different, right? So it gives you a chance. And especially if you're not the favorite, right? If you're not the favorite, which we weren't, even though we were respected and anything else, if you're not the favorite and you get to tournament play, we talked about this with Syracuse. It doesn't have to be playing fast, although that's my way because one of my constraints is I don't want to be boring. Yeah. Penn State, they were different. It gave them a chance, right? You had to guard 5 guys on the perimeter. You had to guard a old man game with Pickett. He was a tough cover, right? Now, where were they fragile? Texas had a guy or 2 that could cover them. Yeah. You're always fragile somewhere, and there's nothing you can do about that. But in terms of maximizing your potential, did a pretty darn good job. Yeah. Right. So I think
which we were all talking. It was yourself, myself, Tyler Smith, Brandon Watkins, and Titus Ivory on a text chain. And one of the things you said was it really does almost make you appreciate because I think we watch that team and we say they're better than us. now apples and oranges in terms of the time, in terms of the way the game's played. It was completely different. But
we got way more
it
threes.
does make you appreciate how hard it is to get to a Sweet 16, given how
Well,
good and different and unique that team was.
Yeah, I'm delusional, right? Like I'm still.
Yeah.
It took me 15 years before I appreciated the Sweet 16 run.
Yeah.
Everyone would tell me how amazing it was. I'm like,
We
lost to
we should have
Temple,
played
man.
in the Elite Eight.
We
We
lost
beat
to
that team
Temple.
earlier
Yeah.
this year. Yeah.
So, and again, good team, but we didn't play well. Blah blah blah. Well, the other thing that helped me was I had 2 home games to get to the Sweet 16, and that was hard enough, right?
Yeah.
Just getting through the season and managing injuries. Like this is D3. We had a really good team. Still, it's really hard, right? You're one sprained ankle away from it not happening and nothing you can do. So it's good to step back and appreciate it and be thankful. But I think that actually helped me too, was like, wait a second, if this was hard for us at the Division III level with a top 20 team, how hard is it for us when we were a 7 seed? And that was probably the only 2 seed we could have upset, right? So even Penn State I think that was a really good team. I think Shrewsbury's done a great job and coached them up, but Texas was a tough matchup.
Yeah, it was bad matchup.
And they played really well to beat them. And that's why it's so difficult.
I thought A&M was a bad matchup. I had them earlier this season, but the problem is A&M didn't play the way A&M usually plays. Found that to be really interesting.
Here's another topic, right? That A&M brings up to me, and I thought Texas was different. I thought Purdue was a good example. It's like I write it on the board or on the scout. Not every time, but my players hear it often. The aggressor always wins.
Yeah.
You have to find a way, like when you develop a scouting plan, like, or not a scout, a game plan. When you develop your game plan, this is our game plan. If it doesn't help you become the aggressor, you now are in a position to be upset. Yeah. And we talked about this with Purdue last year when they lost to St. Peter's.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that I'm not playing Monday morning quarterback saying I'm guaranteed this would work. But I wonder, did they ever go into a coach's meeting and go, hey, you know what? We're ginormous, and they're not. Let's put our biggest lineup on. Let's act like it's 1967. Dump it over top in the post. Put 3 guys around the rim and rebound until we get a layup or kick it out for a wide open 3.
Yeah.
We score 75, 80. They score 65, 70. We call it a day. Yeah. That's an aggressive mindset. That's something that they have to adjust to. Now, maybe they felt like they couldn't do it. Maybe they did talk about it, whatever. But it was the same thing the other night. It was like you could tell FDU was the aggressor, right? They were the one who was the aggressor. They're built like that to always be that. But in that context,
and part of being the aggressor is also imposing your style, your system, your terms on the game. And FDU, they dictated the terms of that matchup.
Yeah, it's David and Goliath, right? Yeah. He neutralized the spear and the sword and the armor with his slingshot by keeping his distance and firing away.
But I also like the Revolutionary War analogy, right? If you're facing the redcoats, you don't meet them on the battlefield, right? You meet them at the pass. You thin them out. You dictate the way that battle's fought to the point where, if you look at Purdue in so many ways, they were the redcoats. They didn't want to play that game. You could see it in their eyes. Those young guys, those guards, they had no confidence shooting the basketball.
Well, that was the other thing. That's the other thing about the NCAA tournament. Let's talk about that. Old guys win.
Yeah. Well,
and now in today's environment, right? I looked at even Coastal Carolina. They got the NAIA Player of the Year, who was a great defender. Love this kid, and one of the best players in D2 from West Liberty. On their squad, like central pieces on this squad. They're 23 years old. They've been in college 4 or 5 years. They learned how to play at a high level, at a lower level, and now they're better, right? Yeah. That's what's happening in college basketball is like get old, stay old. Well, I've been doing that for 5, 6 years. You got to take what you can get and try to get old, stay old, and develop younger players until they get old so that they can be great. You're seeing that in the NCAA tournament. And remember, I think I texted you when you had the Drake game. Wasn't it Drake Bradley?
Yeah, Arch Madness, MVC championship, yeah.
We should find that video I sent you. I think I texted you that video, right, where I kind of listened to the coach from Drake when he was given his halftime explanation.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
I don't know if I watched it because I was calling the game. So you probably
check my
sent it to me.
decks or what?
Well,
So
you probably sent it during the game while I was calling
I probably
the game.
did.
I can't watch a video then.
So I think I said,
text,
I think I sent the text, and I think I listened to his interview, and then I said, I paused it, and I said, what he should be saying is, she was saying, what are the keys to the game? And blah, blah, blah. I said, you know what the key to the game is? My dudes have muscles and theirs don't.
Yep.
They're dudes who are 24 years old, and these guys are 19 and 20-year-old children. That's the key to the game.
Jerome Tang said the same exact thing when
when
K-State beat Kentucky. He said, we have more dudes than them. It's exactly what he said. We have more dudes than Kentucky.
These guys are dudes. And there's something to be said about, and that's why the transfer portals explain everything else, is you have numerous kids who are essentially being trained. I got something coming in here. Who are essentially being trained by mid-major, low-major programs.
Yes.
Right. In order to go to the high major programs.
All right. So is that not? This is where I had this conversation. I told you I had the conversation with Dan Gavitt, Chris Reynolds, and Chris Rask.
Minor leagues, man. It's the minor leagues.
But that's the thing. I mean, is that not where this is headed? Because what that starts to sound like is the Power Five is the NBA. That's what we're seeing already. Power Five guys.
Yeah, everybody else is the G League.
So Power Five guys say, I don't want to take a chance on an incoming freshman anymore. I don't want to have to go through those growing pains and then only to have them not like what's going on and then transfer out. I would rather these guys go someplace else, learn, be humbled, develop some sense of accountability, good habits, actually just habits in general, where you're actually being coached for the first time. And then if they perform, then you poach them from those programs. And that's what's happening, where it's like college teams are saying the same thing the NBA is saying. We don't want high school kids. We don't want to have to develop projects.
Listen,
more finished project.
I do this at our level. It's the same thing. It's just a little bit different because there's not the ability to transfer up that much.
Yeah.
Right. The only way you transfer up is like somebody's best player wants to come to you. Right. That's transferring up. Yeah. A team that's lower than you, and just in the general. Right. If I'm a top 25 team, and I take somebody's best player from the 200th best team. I don't know. That would be moving up as opposed to like D2 to D1 or Northeast Conference Player of the Year now visiting Penn State. That it's inevitable. You can't stop it from happening. And really, if somebody was smart back in the day, that's what they would have done anyway, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We always saw the thing to transfer down. But I said when we were watching the Penn State game, Cameron Winter hit a couple tough mid-range shots, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I think it was to Elijah or somebody was there. I said, if he had gone to Penn State right out of school, he wouldn't have that shot.
Yeah.
But where did he develop that shot? At Drexel.
Yeah.
That's where he developed that shot, right? He developed that shot at a mid-major level, being a main guy, and now he moves up.
Marquise Noel, K-State.
Yeah, same thing.
You think
where did he go first?
You think 5'8", 5'9"? Where did he go first? Gosh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. This is terrible. Again, you hit me on the spot with this stuff, and I know it. I just can't think of it.
That's a great example, right? So if I wanted to go, Little Rock.
Little Rock. Yes. Yeah. Little Rock.
Great example, right?
Yep.
Is he a Jersey guy? Oh, he went to St. Pat's.
St. Pat's, yes.
Yeah, New York guard, St. Pat's. There you go.
Yep.
So he's got that New York feel, right? Take care of your New York guards. If you want to get more New York guards, you got to do that. But great example, right? All these guys have been trained in the minor leagues essentially to play in the pros, which is the Power Five. There's nothing you could do about that, right? You've opened up the portal. It's inevitable, right? They don't need to sit out. You can't say no to those guys. I can't say no to older players who have played. I get inquiries all the time. When I took over at Rowan, right? This is the Rowan limitations and formulas. I just simply said, we need to make this the best rehab basketball facility in Division III.
Yes, basketball rehab.
Yeah, it's like if you have had a negative experience, you haven't been able to play your game, you want to come here and do so. I've lost some games because I let players play, right?
Yeah.
But what's my other option, right? To lose more games with less happy players and not have great
not
recruits.
not get good players. Yeah,
That's what people are realizing.
That be the case? Can't that be the case at a mid to lower Division I level team? Like, couldn't you take the same approach and say, look, I may only have these guys for 2 years.
Yeah. Oh no,
So
it's
be it.
100. It's
You have
it's
to accept it in a way that you are the training grounds for some of these guys, and they will get greater opportunities. Which, like, I mean, I know that's tough, and I know a lot of mid-majors have complained about that with the transfer portal, but that's just the reality.
Well, and you can't resist it.
Yeah.
It just is what. So I remember just when I took over.
You resist it, you won't get players.
Yes, you're better off serving those kids well. And like if I was at a mid-major, well, one is you got to be careful you out recruit yourself. That's a problem.
Knowing that the kid's coming there just to get someplace else.
Yeah, they're too good for you.
Yeah.
You're better off getting some good, solid D1 players that aren't necessarily.
They're too good for you, and they're not really good enough.
Well, yeah, because you're going to get the worst of them.
Yes.
So the worst of them is their first couple years, right? So you need to have some players that way, right? And if you can win and be competitive that way, for some schools that might be the way, is to be the transfer station, right? To say, hey, I'll develop you, and I'm not going to stop you from transferring. Look at who ended up at the Power 5 from my school. That could be a possibility, right?
Yeah.
I think just in terms of continuity, right? I've said this before, I think, is like we view our program in like 2-year segments, right? Like you're trying to get a nucleus that's there for 2 years. 2-year teams, more or less. And again, there's some exceptions to that, but in general, that's how you're thinking. The whole notion of like 3-4 year guys and they all kind of grow up together, and you need a culture that you can is anti-fragile enough to handle 1-2 year teams. That's the way it is for me. That's the way it is.
I think it's the way it's going for everybody right now.
It is. Yeah, that's why I did it, is because I figured that was the future. I might as well do it now.
That's even that way for a lot of transfers that are transferring up. They're really 2-year guys. I mean, those are the ideal ones.
So that's the other component of this, is if you're at a low major, mid-major, you have a need to develop some core guys, right? You want to have some core guys who really are the kind of keepers of your culture, the keepers of your program. They're usually not going to be your best players. There'll be very rare exceptions to that. They'll usually just be surprises, right?
Or they'll be the guys that know that they're highly effective there, but likely won't be elsewhere. Like the way you play.
Yeah, they got to know. They got to know it's better.
Matt Langle, right? Matt Langle at Colgate. Those dudes, they stay around. They even come back because it's like, I know how good I am here. What am I going to be if I go elsewhere?
It's also most of his guys had a key defect.
Yes,
in their ability to play at a higher level. So they had a key defect, whether it's they're a step slow or they're a couple inches shorter. It's important at that level to recruit guys with defects, because then you can keep them. So when people say, "Oh no, he's a step slow," or "He's 2 steps slow," whatever,
but you can't have too many dudes with the same defect. Like they got a point guard from California that's different. He's different. He's good,
but
he's got other defects, right?
Yes.
And his defect might be his freshman, but he's good. He's different. That's interesting.
Well, go back to this though. This is something I've thought of. It's like you want to position yourself as a great place to transfer down and up.
Yeah.
If you're these schools, is you need transfer up means like Coastal Carolina, like FDU, Division II guys who are Division I caliber players, but they're better players now 2-3 years down the road because of their ability to play good Division II basketball, right? Than they were coming out. And that's the thing that people, this guy wasn't recruited by anybody in high school because he wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
He wasn't there yet.
Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson's a great example.
Yeah. Now, somebody maybe should have seen that. But he grew. He grew like 6-7 inches.
He grew, but he was just behind from a skill standpoint. He couldn't get by anybody. He didn't know how good of a shooter he was. He developed that shot. And then he went to the right place. Played for John Beeline,
but take the point guard at FDU.
Yeah, Robert.
He played 4 years of good Division II basketball with a good coach in a good situation. He got really good. He was good enough, right? Was he ready for D1? Maybe, but if he had gone to FDU right out of school, you might never have heard about him. You know what I mean? Because he didn't get to play as much and develop as much. So I think, I've even said this to recruits, like if you want to go Power 5, don't go there first. Like unless you're a top 50 obvious dude.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't go there first.
Which means you likely
else.
transfer from Power 5 to another Power 5. That's the way it seems to go a lot.
Yeah, or kids got to realize that they should transfer down because it's better for them to be particularly kids who, there's a few examples I know where.
Look me. I think I'm a prime example. I probably should have transferred down.
You would have been better transferring down.
I would have been better if I transferred to.
You would have been better staying or transferring down.
Yeah,
that's it.
Or going to Gonzaga. I probably should have thought about that.
Well, that was at the time. That was transferring down.
Yes, it was.
And that would have been better for you because you would have had a chance to kind of get back some of the game that you had kind of lost a little bit.
Beat me again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably should have gone to Yale, to be honest.
Yeah, they must have been sneaking you in there.
Yeah, no, that was funny. Yale could get me in, but Stanford couldn't. I had to take my SATs over again.
So, but I think that's just an important conversation for people who don't realize these dynamics are just inevitable. And I also don't think they realize the degree of difficulty because of all the moving parts, right?
Yeah.
Injuries are always present, but we use Penn State as an example because we're so familiar with them and follow them, but there's such minimal room for error in when you build a team this way, right?
Yeah.
And that's why the NBA, sometimes it just doesn't work, right? Jalen Pickett clearly was a really good player, but this good,
Yeah.
Maybe, of course, the coaching staff and Micah did a great job with him. But if he goes somewhere else, that might not happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think people understand. Like you really do, having a professional background, which is what my background is in. Like, this is the way I think anyway. Of like, all right, this is our centerpiece coming back. Here's what we got to surround him with. Let's go find it. Right. And then if we don't get it, and a bunch of other dudes come our way that we got to take, all right, let's figure it out.
Yeah, coach.
If you don't have that mindset in today's environment, you're not going to make it.
Yeah,
you're just not going to make it.
You'll have the one anomaly every 5 years.
You'll
almost
get
by
lucky.
accident. Yeah,
you can win with enough talent. You'll get lucky at some point.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting because I feel like this is something that like 5 years from now we'll have a better recipe for it. 10 years from now we'll have a better, and then everything will change again. But a lot of it too is players just figuring out what really works for them. Like players haven't really figured that out yet. Kids haven't figured that out. It's been a bit of the Wild West. The NIL's making that a little crazy too. But once players figure out these are the statistics, these are the numbers, these are the guys that do well, this is the percentage, I do think you can make better decisions. I mean, it was different when I transferred. Like, I was one of the top 3 transfers in the country when I transferred. Think about me transferring today. I'd be like in the top 100.
Yeah.
There's so much out there, and that makes the whole market different.
What's not different, though, and this would be an argument if I was, which I guess I am making this argument, right? Because I'll have a lot of D2 guys or former D1 guys, is like, would you rather have fun and win? Like, you got a guaranteed, I let you play and we're going to win. Like, if that's what you want, playing with other talented players, being competitive, having good practices, and in a sense, would you rather be a bigger fish in a smaller pond? Yeah. Or would you rather take the risk that you're a smaller fish in a bigger pond?
Well,
and I think a lot.
Yeah, look at me. I moved back to Pittman, New Jersey. I clearly like to be the.
That's what's interesting about this component, though, is if you're a guard transferring from a Power 5, you probably, if you're not established, that is, in your Power 5 school, and you're transferring, like, moving down is the best option.
Yes,
it is. Like, if you want to play professionally, you want to have a resume, you want to get on film, that would be my pitch. But if you are already established at the level you're at, whether it's the Northeast Conference or whether it's D2, high level, or whether it's whatever, mid-major.
Pick it at Siena.
Yeah. Well, pick it at Siena, or any of those guys.
Even look at all the guys from Wichita State that have transferred that have been phenomenal. Dexter Dennis, Ricky Council.
Where they transferred to?
Well, you had Arkansas, you had Texas A&M.
Well, and that's
Morris
something that
Udeze.
Musselman's he
Yeah.
specialized in that, right? And I think that's smart. He's
But I'm
operated
saying he
more.
got guys that played in a lower level mid-major, right? I guess you would consider Wichita State as quasi mid-major.
Yeah, it's on the higher. Yeah, I
So
would say high
but a
mid-major.
lower level high mid-major.
Yeah.
You know, that's a dude who's played against great competition.
Yep.
They've had success. He's been coached. He understands the value of a role. He understands what his role pretty much is, what he does, what he doesn't do. I always say, like, it's probably best to know what you're not just as much as it's good to know what you are. And it seems like that's a big part of those guys that have success. They walk into a role.
And that's different. Also, you also have established yourself as a certain kind of player. So it's easier for me to clarify how I should maximize your potential. Right. Yeah. So that's the job, right? That's the job for a Power 5 coach or even a mid-major coach or whatever is I have proven to you that I can maximize your potential in the same way an NBA coach can. So you sign that good free agent deal.
Yeah. True.
That's what it is. It's the pros, man. So we could go on and on about that.
Yeah, we could.
We hit our limit.
Yeah, we're already like 46 minutes. It's amazing. I think it's been like 80-20 today too. I think you've done the most talking.
I've been thinking about this a lot.
Well, I got 3 hours of radio coming up. I'll take over that show. We should do this again in reaction to some of the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups. Maybe this weekend, maybe Monday, sometime around there. I'm done after this. I'm done after this. This is crazy. Sometimes it's like bittersweet because it's like so much goes into the season and it's goes from 0 to 100 miles an hour, and then 100 miles an hour to 0 pretty quickly. So kind of bittersweet, but I got some yard work to do. Got some weeds growing. It's time. Golf game is ready. So yeah, maybe we'll do a little bit more of a reaction to some of the games, kind of break down some of what we like, what we don't like. I know what we don't like, and a lot of it's just the way these games are called. It's driving us nuts, man. Just stop helping the defense type of thing. So we'll see. We'll break down some of the games. We'll have more to talk about. And then as the offseason, gets rolling, we'll probably start to bring some guests on. I know I've talked to Coach Izzo about that. It'll be a fun conversation. Just spend 45 minutes with Coach. We'll actually let him talk a little bit too. Promise.
I would ask questions on that one. That's for sure.
You can ask questions. That'll be a good conversation.
He's got plenty to teach us.
But yeah, we have a lot of coaches that we'll be able to get on, and I think there'll be good conversations. Just kind of clarifying their thoughts on college basketball, but also just getting into the philosophies. I think sharing thoughts and philosophies is ultimately how you make the game better, and that's ultimately our goal. So we hope to do this again in another few days. We'll let you know when it comes out, but we appreciate anybody who's listening, even if it's just friends and family. We appreciate you.